Welcome back. Today we're back in the workshop, continuing work on the Holmside of George's. So we've already dealt with the outside, the motion, that's all nice and tight now. The next thing to look at is a combination of the valve gear and the timing. He didn't think the timing was quite right, and there's a little bit of slack in the valve gear. If I'm taking it apart to sort the slack in the valve gear in the eccentrics, then I might as well deal with the timing at the same time, because while the eccentrics are off, then I can adjust the eccentrics. So, first things first, I'll get the running board, last bit of running board off, and the smoke box out of the way. I can open up the cylinder covers, or the valve chest covers rather, and then we can look at what the timing's doing. So, I'll get on with that, and then I'll join you soon. So I've got everything off and I've got it up on end, as you can see. Now, I've noticed with some of the eccentric straps, even though they're loose, there is a little bit of play where they haven't been fully tightened up originally. Presumably because they were too tight. Well, now they've slackened off, I can undo these bolts, or undo the locking nuts, tighten up the bolt, tighten it all up. So I'm going to do that across all four and then see what needs a little bit of work because it's still too loose. I'm looking at that one in particular, thinking it looks a bit different to the other three. These look like bronze, whereas that looks like a big lump of brass. So, with these tightened up until those faces meet, I've actually got hardly any movement on any of these eccentrics, except for this one, which is different. When I say it's different, I don't know if you can see, it's a very different colour. It looks more yellow, so it feels more brass, and it looks like it's just been machined from solid rather than the bronze ones, which were probably castings. So I need to think about what to do with this. I can either just take it off, skim these edges, put it back together to take out the slack, which is what I would do if it was mine and if it was a short-term fix, because all the wear would be front and back. That's the way it pushes. Up and down, it doesn't really get any significant wear. So by just cleaning up those faces, you put it back together and take out the wear. However, that is quite a lot. I need to have a chat with George, decide what he wants to do, but that is probably one of the other big knocks on the engine. So that definitely wants to come apart and have something done with it. So I've made a decision because I couldn't get hold of George when I phoned him a second ago. It's a midway measure. Let me talk you through it. I've decided to swap these two out for each other because they are both the rod which goes from, as we look up, left to right. So it's, as it happens, this one is the forward eccentric for this side, this one is the back eccentric for this side. So my theory being, the back eccentric will see a lot less wear than the forward eccentric. It's generally the way Stephensons goes. There's a lot more load on the end of the eccentric that's doing the work as you're moving, which 90% of the time, if not more, is forward. So I will put that on the rear eccentric for the other side, and this one on the forward eccentric for that side. So the forward eccentrics are these better bronze eccentrics, and the rear eccentric on this side is this brass eccentric. But we will know for the future that that brass eccentric wants to be replaced the next time there's some work being done. So yeah, I'm going to take the rods off from the expansion link, swap them over and put it all back together. So I have hit a little snag. When I built my Ginty, the 5-inch, which is over there, the two eccentrics were lined up so the expansion link was halfway between the two eccentrics. So they both had a slight angle, so you could swap them over if you wanted to. This one, as you can see, they're back to back. It's only one of them that's got the angle on, and it's the inboard one, so the valve, the expansion links are sort of outboard. So what I'm going to try and do is swap the arms over between the two links, and then we can carry on with the same plan. So I'll be back. So, swapping the arms over worked. That's the one that came from over here, with the old arm back on it, connected up on that side. The other one is up here. I'm about to offer it up, see if there's a bit of play, and if there is, see if I can figure out how much needs to come off, or just experiment and take a little bit off at a time until it nips up nicely. Now, before I show you how I'm going to tackle just taking a little bit off of these, I will remind you that this is not necessarily the best way, not necessarily the most accurate way, but it is the way that I've chosen to try to show more beginnery people who might not think they've got the confidence to try this kind of thing, how they could take up this slack. So I'm going to rub them on a piece of emery and I will show you just how I'm going to do it. I can only vaguely show you while I'm holding a camera at the same time and trying to talk to you, but you'll get the idea, and then I'll carry on and do it until it fits. So I have actually stapled 2 strips of different grade paper to this piece of wood on the bench, and I will rub the eccentrics or straps on there, bit on both, keeping them as vertical as I can, and slowly just take a little bit off the surface, try them and see how it goes, and then just keep doing a bit more until all the slack has gone. Et voila! With that in place, I've tightened up the 2 bolts. It still moves, but there's no slack. That was a bit of luck. I did a little bit of skill, a little bit of luck. I didn't go too mad. I took a little bit off, squeezed them together, felt like they're still a little bit loose, so I did a little bit more, put them back together, and it felt a lot better. So I just cleaned them up a little bit more on the finer stuff, put them together, tightened them up, and that's them, the 2 bolts tight. So with all of these, it's a clearance hole in the back half, it's tapped in the front half, so I don't actually know why there's a nut and a lock nut, because the first nut is the lock nut. So effectively it's got 3 nuts, but nothing wrong with that, extra weight. So I'll get this put back together, I'll put the top together, and then we can sort of check out the timing and see if there's anything we want to do up at the top end, at the front end there. So that's the eccentrics sorted, but there's still a bit of movement on the valve gear up and down, going forward reverse. Let's spin the engine around and take a look. So if I put the engine in sort of middle gear, there's a reasonable amount of movement there, but look how much of that movement is just in that pin. So we can take this out. Always made difficult by doing one-handed. Take this out and take a look at it. And as if by magic, the nut is off. But the pin is a bolt. So I'm going to check out the size of that hole, maybe put a reamer through it to clean it up, and then make a new pin that goes through and is a nice fit without a thread as the bearing part. Well, that was easy. I just put a quarter reamer in by hand and the holes are pretty good. That has taken out a lot more of the play. There's still a bit in the actual reverser itself, but there's not a lot I can do about that. That's just the movement in the slots. but that is pretty good. So I'm just going to make a new pin that's a 1/4 diameter. So that was probably a 1/4 bolt, but a bolt will never truly be a 1/4, and if it wears, it's wearing the threads and it'll wear quite easily. So I'll make a bolt, a pin with a shoulder and a nut, and we'll be all good. So this is the start of the pin. I've turned it down to 1/4 and I've put a 3/16 thread on the end, if only my camera would focus. 3/16 thread on the end. Haven't cut it to length yet, but we will do that in a moment. I have used my handle in the back of the lathe to turn the lathe while I threaded the end. And I'm not going to tell you how I know this, but when you do use one of these, remember to take it out before you start the lathe again. So, new pin made, pushed in. Might just want a little tap home, plastic hammer. I don't know if you see that's just sticking through. And we'll put a nut on the inside. So both the head of the bolt and the head of the nut, I've just put 2 flats on so they can be nipped up with a pair of spanners. And then that is all the play gone from there. So, just the cylinders now. So I think I'm going to tackle the cylinders in the next episode. I could just set up the timing, check the timing and bolt it all back up. But there is another issue that George has mentioned, which I think I'm going to try and solve. Let's talk you through the problem first and then I'll show you why it's doing it. When he pulls away from stationary, as he opens the regulator, there's just a big rush of steam up the chimney, and then eventually more and more regulator, and suddenly the rush of steam goes and the engine starts to move. Let's have a look at why. So basically the problem is in the vertical valve face situation. You can see the valve inside there, currently sitting on the seat. However, all that movement, the valve can drop off the seat and then allow the steam to just pass from the steam in the steam chest straight up the exhaust. So we're going to try and do something about that, but it means getting the valves out. So I'm going to leave that to another day. I do have a couple of ideas on what I could do. If you've got any more, get in touch. Let me know what you would do. And then I'll tell you what I'm thinking of next time. And if anyone's come up with some better ideas, I'll share them and might even go for one of them. But I'll let other people know what other ideas have been shown. So, do let me know. I'm going to put off touching that for a couple of days just to see what comes through. And yeah, take care. Do please subscribe, like, comment. Let me know what you like. Let me know what you don't like. Would you have done it the same way as I've done it? Or would you have done something different? I know there's things I could have done differently. But as I've always said, a lot of this channel is to try and encourage newcomers to have a go. And the more technical and more difficult you make it, the less likely it is that people will think, oh yeah, I could actually do that. So keep that in mind when you think about what I've done. Develop what I've done, do your own thing. But whatever you like, please do come back. Please do let me know what you think and enjoy. I will see you again soon.